You woke up this morning. You woke up this morning feeling it again. That low, heavy feeling sitting somewhere behind your chest. That pull toward stillness. That voice that says nothing is worth the effort. You might have a name for it. You might have had it for years, and you have probably been told in some way or another that something is wrong with you. But what if nothing is wrong with you? What if that weight you carry is not a flaw in your design, but a feature? A very recent feature, one that appeared in your ancestors less than 24,000 years ago, and one that might tell us more about the world they were forced into than the brains they were born with. The real answer to depression is far stranger than you have been told. Your brain is old, far older than the cities you live in, far older than the jobs you work, the screens you stare at, the schedules you follow. The core architecture of your brain, the structures that regulate fear, reward, memory, and mood, was shaped over millions of years of life on the move. Your ancestors were hunter-gatherers. They walked. They foraged. They slept under open sky. They lived in small bands of people they had known their entire lives. And for the overwhelming majority of human history, that was the only life there was. Then something changed. Around 12,000 years ago, in a crescent of land stretching from modern-day Turkey through the Fertile Crescent and down into Egypt, humans began farming. They planted seeds. They stayed in one place. They built walls and stored grain and waited for seasons to turn. It was, by any measure, one of the most consequential decisions our species ever made. It gave us civilization. It gave us writing, cities, science, medicine, art. It also, according to a 2025 study published in the journal Cerebral Cortex, may have given us depression. Researchers from Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, using data from the Human Genome Dating Project, traced the emergence of specific genetic variants linked to human traits across 5 million years of evolution. What they found was striking. Most of the variants tied to intelligence, cortical development, and psychiatric conditions appeared hundreds of thousands of years ago. But the genetic variants most strongly associated with depression, the specific configurations of DNA that predict susceptibility to low mood, withdrawal, fatigue, and hopelessness, appeared just 24,000 years ago. On the evolutionary timescale, that is practically yesterday. And there is more. A separate analysis of ancient DNA, led by Evan Irving Pease and colleagues and published in 2024, found that the alleles, the specific gene variants, associated with mood disorders were overrepresented in the genomes of early farmers living roughly 11,000 years ago. Not in hunter-gatherers, not in the people who came before, in the farmers. The people who had just given up the only life human beings had ever known. Think about what that means for a moment. Your brain did not evolve for the life you are living. It evolved for a life of constant movement, constant social contact, constant sensory engagement with the natural world. It evolved for a life where your decisions had immediate physical consequences, where you could see the results of your effort within hours, where sleep followed sunset and waking followed sunrise, and your body moved through the world the way it was built to move. Then, almost overnight in evolutionary terms, that life vanished, and your ancestors had to adapt. Some of the adaptations were physical. Harvard researchers publishing in Nature in 2026 found that the transition to farming triggered one of the fastest periods of genetic change in human history. 479 genetic variants shifting in just 10,000 years. Resistance to tuberculosis increased. Digestion rewired itself to handle grains. Skin pigmentation shifted. But buried in that surge of adaptation were changes to the brain, changes to mood, changes to how your nervous system responds to stillness, to repetition, to isolation, to the kind of low-grade chronic stress that comes not from a predator lunging out of the dark, but from a harvest that might fail, a landlord who might come, a season that will not turn in time. Depression, in this light, looks less like a disorder and more like an adaptation that misfired. Psychiatrist and author Edward Bullmore, in his research on the inflamed brain, has argued for years that modern depression is not simply a chemical imbalance, it is a whole body response, one shaped by the same inflammatory systems your immune system uses to fight infection. And those systems were not built for a world of chronic low-grade stress. They were built for a world of acute physical threat. Get hurt, inflame, heal, move on. The modern world, with its endless social comparison, financial precarity, isolation masked as connectivity, and disconnection from the natural rhythms of light and dark, activates those systems without ever giving them a clean resolution. The alarm rings, and it does not stop. Psychologist Stephen Hayes, the developer of acceptance and commitment therapy, has described the human mind as a machine built to solve survival problems that no longer exist. Your ancestors needed to anticipate danger, so your brain learned to simulate future threats. They needed to remember failure so they would not repeat it. So your brain learned to replay painful memories. They needed to care deeply about social rejection, because being cast out of the group meant death. So your brain learned to treat loneliness like a wound. Every one of these tendencies made your ancestors more likely to survive. Every one of them, in a different world, becomes a pathway to despair. But here is where the story becomes genuinely strange, because not everyone developed these variants. Not every population shows the same rate. Not every ancient genome tells the same story. And researchers are only beginning to understand why some of the variants associated with depression spread so widely, so quickly, in the populations that adopted farming earliest. One hypothesis is that the low mood, social withdrawal, and energy conservation that we now call depression may have served a real function in that new environment. When resources are scarce and the future is uncertain, slowing down, stopping, withdrawing, conserving energy, reducing ambition may have improved survival. The organism that stopped thrashing and waited was sometimes the organism that made it through the winter. That is a deeply uncomfortable idea. But the science does not ask for your comfort. It only asks you to look clearly. What is clear is this: the rise of agriculture changed the human brain in ways we are still reckoning with. A 2025 study from the Science Museum of Virginia found that ancient hominids, including early humans, showed signs of exposure to environmental toxins, lead chief among them, that may have further shaped genetic selection in ways that affected mood and cognition. The transition to settled life brought humans into closer contact with their own waste, their stored grain, their domesticated animals, and the diseases that came with all of them. The body adapted, the brain adapted, and somewhere in that frantic, desperate reshaping, something that looks very much like depression became part of the human inheritance. So what do you do with this? You cannot go back. You are not going to abandon your apartment and take up foraging. The world that shaped your brain for millions of years is gone. What remains is the brain, still running ancient software, still scanning for threats that exist mostly in the mind, still pulling toward rest in a world that will not let you rest. And the research suggests that the things most likely to ease that pull are not complicated. They are ancient. Movement, sunlight, real social contact, not simulated contact through a screen. Sleep that follows the rhythm of light. Work that produces something visible and real. Connection to something larger than the self. Not because these are self-help platitudes, but because they are the conditions your brain was built for. The conditions it spent millions of years expecting to find. The conditions that, when absent, trigger the exact cascade of withdrawal, fatigue, and hopelessness that clinicians call depression. Your brain is not broken. It is looking for a world that no longer exists. And the weight you carry in the morning, that low, heavy feeling sitting somewhere behind your chest, may be the oldest, most human response imaginable. The response of a mind built for the open savanna, waking up once again in a world made of walls.